Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. And welcome to Sharks Unknown, Changing the Face of Shark TV, a screening with shark scientist Jasmin Graham, presented by the New England Aquarium Lecture Series. I am Vicki Spruill. I am the president and CEO here at the aquarium. And sadly, I have a conflict this evening, but I would not miss this opportunity to introduce Jasmin and the important work that she's doing. So you'll see me scoot out, but I will watch this in a bit. Elizabeth Stevenson, who runs, raise your hand, Elizabeth. Here you are, okay. Elizabeth Stevenson, who runs our Marine Conservation Action Fund, which supports community-based conservation projects all around the globe, will join Jasmin on stage following her talk, and she's going to be the one to moderate the Q&A. So thank you, Elizabeth. So most of you probably know that the aquarium is a nonprofit conservation organization that has protected and cared for animals in our care and in the wild for more than 50 years. We are working on a vibrant and vital ocean for all. As we celebrate over 50 years, 54 to be exact, of our commitment to this cause, we recognize the imperative of reflecting the diverse world we live in, both in our teams and in our approach to marine conservation. While we've made some strides, we are acutely aware that this is just the beginning. Our path forward includes deepening our engagement with diverse communities, listening to and learning from their experiences, and collaboratively working towards a more inclusive and equitable field. And so, we are deeply honored to present tonight's speaker, shark scientist Jasmin Graham. As we welcome Jasmin this evening, we celebrate her groundbreaking contributions to shark science and embrace the broader and bigger vision of what she represents, a vision where inclusivity, equity, and diverse perspectives are integral to our understanding and stewardship of the ocean. Jasmin is an accomplished marine biologist, an environmental educator, a social justice activist, and most recently, a TV star. She became captivated with the ocean as a child when she spent summers fishing with her father in the coastal waters of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Her deep love of science and the ocean led Jasmin to study marine biology in college, and her college mentor, shark scientist Dr. Gavin Naylor, spurred her interest in sharks. Her research focuses on elasmobranchs, sharks and rays, including the endangered small-tooth sawfish, say that 3 times in a row, and hammerhead sharks. She works with fishers and with local communities to incorporate their voices and vast aquatic knowledge to help advance ocean conservation and sustainability practices. She works with them, not for them. In 2020, Jasmin co-founded Minorities in Shark Scientists, also known as MISS, M-I-S-S, to encourage more women and gender minorities of color to take up the study of sharks and to help remove the financial barriers that prevent many from pursuing the field. In addition to her work as president and CEO of MISS, Jasmin works in collaboration with Havenworth Coastal Conservation to study movements of elasmobranchs in the Sarasota Bay. She also serves on the board of directors of the Equity and Diversity Committee for the American Elasmobranch Society, and she is project coordinator for the Marine Science Laboratory Alliance Center of Excellence project based at the Mote Marine Lab in Sarasota, Florida. That lab focuses on researching and promoting best practices to recruit, to support, and to retain minority students in marine science. I don't know how you have the time to do this all, Jasmin. She's been featured on Dive In with Sylvia Earle and Star Talk with Neil deGrasse Tyson, among other podcasts and webinar series, and is now the star of her very own PBS Terra series, Sharks Unknown with Jasmin Graham. Yeah, okay, right? Like, pretty cool. In 2021, she received the Worldwide Fund for Nature's Conservation Leadership Award, which celebrates the achievements of exceptional young people working toward conservation solutions in the United States. She holds a BS in Marine Biology, a BA in Spanish from the College of Charleston, and a Master's in Science in Biological Science from Florida State University through the National Science Foundation's Graduate Research Fellowship Program. Wow. It is my honor and my privilege to welcome Jasmin Graham for tonight's talk and screening. Welcome, Jasmin.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, it's always really embarrassing when people read that stuff out. So I do sleep. So I know that's going to be the first question. I actually sleep a lot. Ask my mother. So I'm really excited to talk to y'all today about changing the face of shark TV, and not just shark TV, but changing the face of shark science and science as a whole. Because if you watch Shark Week, you might think that it's all white sharks and white men. I'm here to tell you it is not. There are more sharks than white sharks, and there are more scientists than white men doing this work. So who am I? I am many things. In addition to being a scientist is not all that I am. I'm a Black woman. I'm a classically trained opera singer. I'm an aerialist. I love D&D. I love playing board games. I have a dog named Iggy. Believe it or not, I'm an introvert. I'm a daughter. I love books. I do musical theater. I love wigs. I have a whole wig closet. Ask me about it later. And I am just going to go ahead and claim it. I'm a lady boss. So what do I do? My work is sort of at the center of this Venn diagram that I have here. So I do science education, I do marine conservation, I do social justice. All of those things are related and interconnected. Because if you want to conserve the marine world, you need to be proactive about including people in that mission. And that means that they have to be educated. They have to know what sorts of threats are facing our oceans, how that impacts them, and the larger context behind the issues that we're dealing with. And if you're going to be educating people, you can't just educate some people. You have to educate all people. And that's where the social justice comes in, because more often than not, these marine conservation issues impact communities that are poorer, communities that are often communities of color, communities in the global south more than they do everyone else. But they are often left out of the conversations, even though it impacts them the most. And so that's why I think social justice is necessary for marine conservation, because we are part of the ecosystem. People are part of the ecosystem. You cannot ignore people and expect to fix these issues. And we can't fix these issues if we start blaming people who can't defend themselves because they weren't invited to the room in the first place. So that is why I do all three of these things together, because people deserve to be educated, everyone deserves to have a voice, and when we achieve that, then we can start actually making progress towards marine conservation. So, oh, y'all are so fun. You clap so much. Thank you. I feel like I'm in church. Okay, so I do a lot of science, and I'm going to just kind of go through it quickly with you so you know a little bit of the science that I do. So I do what's called movement ecology. And movement ecology is understanding how things move in response to, that wasn't good, in response to different stressors. So the way that I do this is through a process called telemetry. So there's two types of telemetry that I use. I use acoustic telemetry and satellite telemetry. So acoustic telemetry uses these receivers, which you can see at the corner of that screen there. These receivers are placed all over the coast. We have receivers all up and down the coast of Florida, the Gulf of Mexico, up the East Coast. And these receivers are really great because whenever an animal swims by that has a transmitter implanted implanted in it. The transmitter is that little thing that looks like a marker there. It's pretty small. We do a quick surgery, implant the transmitter into a wild animal and release it. And as it swims past one of these receivers, that receiver hears the ping from that transmitter and says, oh, this animal just swam past. So we're able to track where they're moving based on those receivers. So it's really cool because you know that they're within a detectable range of that receiver. But everything has its pros and cons. So the con to this is somebody has to go dive down and get that receiver every 6 months to change the battery and download the data. That's why we have interns. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of personnel power that is required to do this. And so it has its cons in that sense. But another con is that this issue of if a tree falls down in the forest and there's no one around to hear it, doesn't make a sound. Well, if a transmitter is pinging and there's no receiver to hear it, it might be making a sound, but you don't know that it's making a sound. So if they aren't near a receiver, you have no idea where they are. You just know that they're not near one of your receivers. So I couple that with satellite telemetry, where I use pop-off satellite archival tags, or PSATs, and these are attached externally to the dorsal fin, which is the most famous part of the shark, dun-na, dun-na. So it goes right there, and then it detaches after a certain number of days, boop, and it pops to the surface, and then you can download the data from a satellite from the comfort of your own home, which is amazing because no one has to go out and find it if you don't want to. You just download the data and you feel good about yourself. So that's really great because it's constantly tracking where it is, but it's an estimate. So there's a big margin of error. So you know where they are, even if they're not by a receiver, but there's a lot more error associated with it. So I combine these two techniques so that I can get fine scale, very accurate data, but then I also know where they are when they're not near the receivers. Okay, so one of the animals that I study is the small-toothed sawfish, which apparently is a tongue teaser, if you're not used to saying it. So it's one of 5 sawfish species that exist in the world. We have them here in the United States. We used to have 2 species of sawfish, the large tooth and the small tooth. You can probably guess what the difference between the 2 of them is. We don't have large tooth anymore. They are locally extinct. They do exist in other places in the world, but no longer in the United States. We lost them around the Industrial Revolution. And at that same time that we lost them, we lost about 95% of the small-toothed sawfish population. They are listed as critically endangered, which the IUCN, the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, makes these decisions about where things are in terms of least concern. We're not worried about these animals at all. To they're extinct, they gone. And critically endangered is right before the they extinct, they gone. So that is bad. Being critically endangered means you're about to not exist anymore. So this is a really threatened species that we have. And we have in the United States what's called a lifeboat population, which means it's keeping the species afloat. If they went down here, they would probably no longer exist anymore. And they're centered in Florida, where I live. So I spend a lot of time working with the species. One, they're adorable. Look at the baby sawfish. They're named sawfish because they have a toothed rostrum. The rostrum is that saw part, has teeth coming off of it. This is a newborn sawfish. As in, my advisor just caught this sawfish as it was exiting the mother's cloaca. That's how fresh this baby is. And you can see it's gross, I know. So you can see that it has the gelatinous covering over its teeth. Anyone have a guess as to why they have a covering over their teeth when they're born? To protect the mother. Anyone ever given birth? You want to give birth to a chainsaw? How does that sound? So evolution has a way of working things out. So there's a jelly covering when they're born, and then it dissolves within a week after they're born. So you can't see its little teeth right here. But that's how small it starts, 70 to 80 centimeters. It gets to be 15 feet long. That's wild. That is a huge animal. So they're super cool. Have I convinced you? They're very cool. So they were listed on the Endangered Species Act in 2003, and I work very closely with the small-toothed sawfish recovery team to try to bring these animals back from the brink of extinction. We're having a lot of success. Their numbers are showing increases, so this is a success story, y'all. So if you're like me and you're just a big old nerd and you want to read a scientific paper, which I do, I will say a lot of scientific papers suck because scientists are really bad at writing and it doesn't make any sense and there's a lot of jargon and no one knows what you're talking about. I purposely write my papers so that anyone can read them. So if you want to go read this paper, go read it. And learn all about the small-toothed sawfish and how they move around the coast of Florida. And if you can't get enough of sawfish, there's another one, which is about bycatch risk. So one of their big threats is that they get caught in these commercial fisheries, particularly the shrimp trawl fishery. So this is about where the riskiest parts are, and it gives a suggestion of a closure that could prevent a lot of these bycatch issues. All right, so that's a small-toothed sawfish. What else did I do? Red tide. Anyone ever heard of a harmful algal bloom? Anyone know what that is? Yeah, red tide. It's nasty stuff. We got it in Florida. It makes people cough. It kills all the fish. Guess what? Also affects sharks. How? We don't know because people haven't really studied that. So that's why I'm looking at it. So it produces this toxin called a brevetoxin. It also decreases the dissolved oxygen concentrations. So dissolved oxygen is oxygen that is dissolved in water. Pretty straightforward. But why is that important? Well, fish breathe oxygen. I know that they don't respire like we do, but they are getting oxygen from the water. So if there is no oxygen in the water, guess what? They suffocate underwater. And that's bad. So decreasing your dissolved oxygen is not good. So this leads to these massive fish kills. So if you've ever been in Florida when there's a red tide event, there's just dead fish floating everywhere. It also affects people, like I said. And these events have been increasing in frequency, magnitude, and duration over the past decade. So the red tide is caused by an algae called Karenia brevis, which is natural. It exists in the environment. There are sometimes blooms, but they usually happen every couple of decades, not every single year or twice a year. And so they're increasing because they have a lot of nutrients in the water from all of our runoff and our gunk that we're putting into our watersheds. And so they're going wild. And so as this is happening, it's really important for us to understand how is it affecting the animals that live there, particularly sharks, which no one looks at because sharks sink when they die, so you don't see them like the dead floating fish. So why is social justice important? There's a lack of diversity in STEM. We talk about a leaky pipeline. I think the leaky pipeline metaphor doesn't do justice to the issue. I like to call it a cliff because there are people climbing the cliff and some people have climbing gear and some people are doing it with their bare hands. And there are some people along this cliff that are actively kicking people off of it. It is a very active process. A leak implies, oops, we don't know what happened. There are some people that are actively trying to keep certain people out of science, and we deserve to acknowledge that. So I also published another paper, if you want to read this paper, about BIPOC voices in ocean sciences. I also published a paper about what scientific societies can do to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion. In that paper, while writing that paper, I discovered that in 2019, I was the only Black member of the American Elasmobranch Society, which is made up of 400 people. Out of 400 people, there was one Black person. That's a problem. We need to solve it. How does this affect marine conservation? Because, like I said, if we don't include people in the conversation, we create a lack of trust. People don't trust science because they haven't been part of it. We create even hostility towards science. There's an equitable distribution of resources, and those most impacted go unheard. So how do we combat this? Another paper. I write a lot of papers. This is another paper on ICON, which is Integrated, Coordinated, Open, Networked Science. It's a different way to do science in which people are included who are impacted by the science. And I'm implementing this in a project that I'm actually doing with my dad, which you heard is somebody that I grew up fishing with and is really big in the fishing community at Myrtle Beach. And so I am interviewing the that generation of fishermen to gather this information before it's lost. Because this is a picture of my grandma, Evelina. She passed away. She fished in the same area for over 50 years. That's what we call in science a long-term data set. But nobody bothered to ask her what she knew because she was poor and she was Black and she never finished grade school. And that's not acceptable. We need to hear from these people who spend their whole lives looking at fish. They know what's happening faster than scientists do. So that's what MISS is all about, creating equitable representation. We have over 400 members in more than 30 countries. We also have Friends of MISS. We do a lot of outreach and education, including our Gill Guardians program. So if you're a big shark nerd, go to that website. There's all sorts of curriculum that you can learn about sharks. And then we have a book, shameless plug. You can buy it anywhere books are sold. There are 35 MISS members whose research is featured in this book. We also do a lot of professional development. We pay for people to go to conferences because, again, one Black person at an entire conference is unacceptable. So I said, what if I just brought an army of people of color with me? That'll be fun. Let's see what they do. And then we also pay for fellowships because, y'all, people shouldn't be out here working for free. Not in this economy. And then we do workshops where we train people to do these techniques, including our Diversifying Ocean Sciences program, which is what was featured in the first episode of Sharks Unknown, which I am about to show to you right now. Got so many different species.
And they'll probably give us a little bit of a rodeo while we're handling them.
This is a lot of sharks all at once. It's a tiny bit of stress.
We're gonna hope for the best.
I'm Jasmin Graham, marine biologist and shark scientist, and I'm here in Biscayne Bay for the first day of our Diversifying Ocean Sciences workshop. It's a year-long program where students learn all about ocean science, and then they get to apply those skills for a week-long intensive hands-on experience aboard the Garvin. Today we'll be doing what's called a shark survey, where we'll go out, catch and release some sharks, take some samples, which we will use to understand the health of the population here. This helps us better understand the species that are here, how plentiful they are, and study the human impacts facing sharks in this area. There's a lot of really incredible species found here, several of which actually use Biscayne Bay as a nursery ground for their young. Nursery grounds are super important for endangered species because if you have a healthy nursery, you have sharks making it to adulthood, reproducing, and replenishing the population. We really need to find some little baby black tips. Again, adorable. We love baby sharks, and it would be really nice to get some data for that species. Participants are going to learn a lot of really cool things. They're going to learn how to do what's called a long line. They're going to learn how to set drum lines. They're going to learn how to take scientific data from sharks, including measurements, tagging, fin clips, muscle biopsy, and they'll also get to watch how we draw blood. Today we're doing one of our shark surveys.
Hey guys, I'm Amani. I'm also one of the co-founders of Minorities in Shark Sciences.
It is an honor to us at Minorities in Shark Sciences to provide these opportunities.
I'm from Bangalore. It's a landlocked city in underdeveloped countries like India. You can't do a lot of live shark-based research because of funding that we receive there or the kind of platforms that we have. So this workshop is like really cool. To be very close to a live shark, I'm pretty nervous to handle them, but equally I want to collect good scientific data that can help improve scientific, the knowledge within the world.
All of our diversifying ocean sciences participants are early career emerging scientists that are eager to get into the field of ocean research.
We're going to be longlining, and typically with this type of fishing, we'll usually catch smaller sharks. So one of the things that I really hope we catch is a black nose. These are a little bit of a smaller species. They often have this little black splotch on their nose. Another shark that we might catch is a smaller black tip. The dead giveaway for these guys is that their fins will have black tips on them and this really beautiful gray kind of lateral stripe right on the side of their body. We also might find a nurse shark, which I absolutely love. They're just completely brown. They have really kind of flat faces. And the last species that we may or may not catch is a bonnet head. They have that cephalofoil, but it's shaped like a little bonnet, and they are incredibly tiny in comparison to the larger hammerhead.
All right, so for this demonstration, we are going to use our friend Vanna white shark here, so we can work the shark up as fast as possible, get them back in the water. So very important, this is the bitey end, this is the slappy end. This is where you live, right here, away from the bitey end and away from the slappy end. So we take the fin clip from the dorsal fin and we use that for genetics. And then the next job is tagging. It's sort of like an identification number. So the way that we do this, we have our tagger. So we push in and then we'll just give that a little tug, make sure that it's stuck in there. And then one more time, you're gonna wanna read that number out nice and loud for the data person. And that's how you work the shark.
So this is the tuna clip. We're gonna be clipping that onto the black line. So here we have our anchor. You're gonna go travel across this line. You're gonna see a red part of the line. This is what buoys are gonna be attached to. So we're gonna have a buoy on each side with a tuna clip on it, and then we're gonna let it go out while we are setting it.
So we just set our 2 long lines and we are waiting. They're soaking for about an hour and we'll go and haul them in, see what we get. All that being said, who knows what we're gonna catch? Who knows if we catch anything? That's why they call it fishing, not catching. Tiburon, tiburon. So here we have a black nose. Chris is about to draw blood. What? There's someone with a stopwatch that records to help measure stress physiology. So we're going to have someone take a biopsy, a little muscle tissue sample, which we can use to look at stable isotopes and also toxins in the sharks. We will put a tag in it and take a fin clip for genetics. This part of the shark doesn't have as many neuroreceptors as, say, our bodies, and it's not an evolutionary advantage for them. So they've evolved to not feel as much as we do. And we will do second blood to look at how its stress went up or down from the workup, and then we will release it. And right now we have a line of sharks, so there are 2 sharks behind this one. It's trying to move a little fast because we've got a traffic jam, so to speak. It's important to move fast. Some sharks are what we call obligate ram ventilators, meaning they have to keep swimming to breathe. There are other sharks that can buccal pump, like nurse sharks and lemon sharks, where they can just sit on the bottom and they use their muscles in their cheeks to pull water over their gills so they don't have to swim. So our obligate ram ventilators need that PVC pipe in to simulate how it would be if they were swimming. They do have water flowing over their gills, so they're getting oxygen, but their bodies are designed to be in water, so they're actually feeling more gravity than they're used to when they're out of water. So we try to move pretty quickly, trying to get them back in the water so that they can go on and live their lives.
Another one.
They got that platform nurse shark on this long line.
This is a lot of sharks all at once. It's a tiny bit of stress.
Do you have another one that needs to skip the line here? 101 for FL?
No, there is moments where things are going to get a little hectic and stressful.
It wasn't terrible. It wasn't that bad. It was a little stressful.
We grab the fin clip to look at its genetics and learn more about it now.
Yeah, it wasn't that bad. It's not. I feel at peace right now.
Now we have a black tip, a big chunky black tip. So black tips get to be much larger than the black noses. My favorite thing about these black tips, they have this very pretty little like Z for Zero on the side of their body. They're really cool.
So we just saw a black tip, which happened to be a retag. And I absolutely love when we get retags. This means that we tagged it previously, either this year or another year. In this case of that black tip, we tagged it back in April of 2019, and we just caught it today in 2023. And with all of the data that we've been taking all week, one of the things that we can see is how much the shark has grown. So I always really love when we get a recapture, because it really gets to kind of bring that data collection full circle and see kind of how they're growing and how they're behaving and if they're actually staying in the area.
It's really exciting, especially having like that direct contact with the shark. And so it's a really special moment for you when you like, oh, this is what I want to do, this is what I like. So yeah, it's a crucial moment in your life, I think. That's for sure.
Sadly, our time has come to a close. But this is see you later, not goodbye. Keep us up to date on what you do, where you go.
I had no idea that I was going to get the hands-on experience that I did. There was plenty of times that I was like scared or nervous. It was more of like the excitement and being able to learn like kind of overruled my nervousness and fear. But it was a great experience overall. Each step of the way, there was always someone there next to me to help me.
My very first time that I got to see a first live shark was when I came to US here as part of Miss Fellowship. This was my first time to do a lot of these techniques. It's an opportunity that the Miss has created for me. Just having to fly all the way from India to US, which took me almost 2 years. I'm not a person who would like scream or screech out about my enjoyment, but deep down I was like crying because I got to see my first shark. It's also a lot of different emotions, which I really don't know how to express about them. So that's how it felt.
Yeah, I always find it so fun when people see their first shark and that initial smile that they get just brings me so much joy.
Yeah, especially since we got so many different species. That's pretty rad. And I think that they learned a lot too.
Which I feel like was an exciting experience for them.
Yeah, I think that these types of workshops are so meaningful, especially just getting to have a bunch of people of color and women on the boat as your first experience.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
So rare.
I think things would have been so amazing if my first experience had been like this, where it's just a bunch of women of color.
Especially to have mentors that look like you, just so impactful.
It makes me really happy, especially when students tell us that they're excited and that they didn't think about it as a career path, because it just makes me feel like we're actually making a change and like doing something that we wanted to do when we started.
We're really excited. We had several people that were like, oh, I never really thought about sharks, but you just opened up all of these possibilities. I'm like, it works! I think that they're gonna go far. Hello, thank you. So this is my contact information. Also, one more shameless plug. There is a QR code there. We do accept donations. We are a 501c3, so all of this is free. We cover everything, visas for people to come, flights for people to come, all of their food, travel. They don't pay for anything for this experience, and they get a stipend because they are taking a week away from their life to participate in this. So I'm gonna just say that in case you wanna, drop a couple dollars.
Oh, it's on. Okay, great. Thank you. Once again, I'm Elizabeth Stevenson, the director of the Marine Conservation Action Fund here at the New England Aquarium, and I feel wildly fortunate that Vicki had a conflict and that I get to be up here with you, because that was like so incredibly inspiring and fascinating and moving, and I'm just so grateful and full of admiration for the work that you do. So just a huge thank you and some deep gratitude for what an incredible leader you are.
Thank you.
I did want to say our sincere apologies about the dots. We had some technical issues and needed to show the file from the internet, and it just created some problems. So I'm very sorry that we had the sparkles on the screen there. But I also wanted to mention that we are very fortunate to have Sonia Cessna up here with us from Sourland Studios. And she is the executive producer of Sharks Unknown. And so right now I'm looking forward to hearing all of your questions. Oh, and I also wanted to mention I am going to be looking at my phone because that's how I'm going to receive questions from online. So
There's somebody with their hand raised over there.
Okay, sorry.
Amazing talk. I really appreciate the fact of the accessibility into these opportunities that isn't always the option for something, because historically it hasn't been that way. It's been a privilege to be able to have that type of opportunity. Because of the fact that you do provide that financial support, do you have a long list of applicants, and what does that vetting process look like to pick the participants that you do have on these trips?
Okay, so the question.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm sorry.
To repeat it.
I'm
Yes.
taking your job. Go.
No, it's fine. You're welcome to repeat the question. So, just recognizing the privilege it's been to do these types of experiences, and with the financial support you provide, what is sort of the application process and the demand for it?
Yeah, that is the hardest part of what I do. So for this past cycle of DOS, which we just picked our participants, we had 177 participants, 177 people apply, and we had 22 spots. So it's really hard. We score on 3 things. The biggest factor is impact. So we do things very differently than how other organizations do things. We actually look for who is it going to impact the most. And what goes into that is considerations of where are they in their career, what other opportunities might they have access to or not have access to, and it really boils down to if this is their only shot, we're going to give it to them. And then we have interests. So what are they interested in? Do their interests align with the opportunity that we're going to provide them? So if they're like, oh, I'm really interested in diving. Well, we're not diving, so that's not an alignment there. So that's another factor. And then the final factor is their goals. So where are they trying to get to? And are we the best people to help them get there? So we don't ask for resumes. We don't ask for GPA. GPA does not tell you whether you're going to be a good scientist or not. It is a number that is impacted by a lot of factors, most of which have nothing to do with your ability. Amani, our CFO there, had a 2.5 GPA, and she is doing scientists, and she is kicking butt. So we don't ask for GPA. We don't think that's important.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yes.
So I know that you design K through 12 curriculum. Do you also provide any opportunities for young children, specifically children of color, to have opportunities before they get into like the college career? As a teacher, I know that a lot of my students of color don't have these opportunities and would love some kind of thing to start their career now.
Okay, great. The question was, with the curriculum that you do you provide opportunities for K-12 students of color to engage in the shark sciences?
Yes, that's a great question. So we have a summer camp every year. and we bring out 20 kids to a remote island off the coast of Florida, and it's very fun because they are like, our phones don't work, what are we gonna do? Put a bunch of preteens and teenagers on an island without their phones, and it gets real interesting real fast. So they get to eat, sleep, breathe marine science for that week. We also offer a spring break camp in our community where we're headquartered in Florida. And then we train teachers to be able to deliver the Guild Guardians content as well. So we are hoping to expand this even more. We're starting up, some members are starting to do outreach in their communities, and we support that by providing them with the resources that they need to do these day-long programs, and hopefully we're expanding to having year-long after-school programs with a couple of our members who are working on that in their local communities.
Wonderful, thank you. We do have a question from the virtual audience. How do sharks change their distribution in space and time as their prey shifts due to climate change, nutrient pollution, and shifts in the productive capacity of essential fish habitat?
That sounds like a dissertation right there. So that's a good question. And the answer is we don't know. At least we don't know for every species. We know for some species because some people have started working on that. But that's the really scary thing about these impacts of climate change and nutrient pollution and things like that we're experiencing. We have no idea how it's going to affect sharks. So some sharks have the ability to move, and they are starting to shift their migrations. So there's a big blacktip shark migration that happens off the coast of Florida. That migration is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's also, they're not moving at the same time. It's like they're confused about when they're supposed to be moving because the temperature isn't right. So it's the time that they migrate, where they migrate, how far they migrate, all of that's changing for the highly migratory species. But there's also species like the small little bonnethead. If you're like 4 feet long, like where are you going? Not far. And so there's this differentiation between different species where some can maybe adapt and some can't, and we have no idea which is which is really scary.
No, it is extremely, extremely alarming to think about, so thank you for that. Okay, more questions from the audience. Oh, yes. Hi.
Well, first I want to say, Jasmin, I just think you're like extremely dope. And I have to say that. No, seriously. I literally had no interest in sharks before coming here tonight, so I'm going to be completely transparent. But I do work with birth to 5. And one of the things we do is we just bring families out to the harbor, families of color, who are like, my kid doesn't like sand, and their kid's like 3 months old. I'm like, how do you know that? Right? Because they know they're already afraid of the ocean or the water. And so I'm just really curious. I know you said K through 12, but have you done any work with parent and children, like early learners, just to expose them to the ocean, and what does that look like? And I just have to say, like, we just need, as much as this was beautiful to watch, we just need to see people like you, right, that really inspires us to want to get out there. Because I'm looking at that, and I don't know if anybody else can relate to this, but I'm like, there's braids and dreads and afros on a boat in the middle of the ocean. And for those people who don't understand culturally what that means, that this was like Christmas early. Seriously, for those of us who do this work and want to really inspire folks to do it, you just did it in like a 20-minute video for me, and I just want to take you home to my community. I mean, there's just no words for it. We talk about it all the time, representation matters, but like it's not just representation, like your passion and your excitement and just your authenticity showed up in that space, and that it just inspired me to want to be on that boat. And I never have inspiration to be on a boat. So just being totally honest, like I can't thank you enough for just being just real and transparent and just bringing the love and passion so that our children who look like you can truly see themselves in the most authentic spaces ever. So this is a question, but it really is a superior thank you for just being you. Seriously.
That was amazing. Thank you. And I wouldn't dare repeat that because it was so beautifully said. And so I'm just going to go to the heart of your question, which is, and thank you so much for that because it was incredible to see. Do you work with parents and very young children, sort of at the very early stages, to get them interested and engaged and for purposes of representation as well?
So we do Science at the Sea, which are community events that anyone can come to. We have had people come with very young children, and we do seine netting, and they get to hold the little baby fish, and then they inevitably scream and throw them. And I'm like, that's a living thing. And they're like, oh no, I'm so sorry. And it's very cute. But yeah, it's really great to see like this initial, I ain't touching that, to like, okay, maybe I'm just going to poke it. And then like, okay, I'm gonna hold it. And then next thing you know, the kids are just like romping through the water. And I'm like, that's ocean baby now. You have an ocean baby. So yeah, it's really beautiful. It is really important. And that's one thing why I do what I do, going to schools. I remember one time I went to a school and it was, I think, a second grade class. And I went and I talked. And I was talking about marine science, and afterwards, this little girl came up to me, and she said, "I like your hair. It looks like mine." That's a powerful moment. And I've also had people come up to me and say, "Well, what do you do with your hair whenever you go out in the ocean?" And if you're not a Black woman, that feels like, an inane question, but that's a very serious concern. That's a barrier for people. And that little girl has probably been carrying that around her whole life, trying to figure out, well, I love the water, but I'm worried about my hair. And she finally had someone to ask it to. And so that's why we do what we do. And Miss actually had a panel a few months ago on hair, and we had people with all different textures, kinks, coils, curls, everything, talking about what they did with their hair when they get in the water. And that's part of the conversation. We got to protect our crowns. And if people feel like their crowns are safe, then they feel like they're safe. So yeah.
Wow, thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for those wonderful remarks. So we have another question from the virtual audience, and this for Sonia as well. How many episodes of Sharks Unknown will there be? And are they all the length of the one we were just shown? Are there plans to include more details of the individual shark science research in the show?
Yeah, totally. So there are going to be 8 episodes of Sharks Unknown. Jasmin came to Gabriela Figueredo, who couldn't be here, the executive producer, another executive producer for Fig Tree Films. And she was like, I want to make a show about the individuals of myths. So this first one is really about a number of different scientists getting into the field. It's back. Oh, maybe, yeah. So actually all the subsequent episodes are usually just with 1 or 2 scientists covering their work. The whole idea is like you're spending a day in the life of the scientist and just kind of seeing what their day-to-day life looks like and what are they studying and what are their questions and what are the questions that they have but haven't answered or trying to figure out how to answer and what are the new questions that are coming up. So actually right now there are 4 episodes you could watch. If you open up YouTube, you can type in PBS Terra and find Sharks Unknown. You should do it, like it, subscribe. And so the next one will be coming out kind of at the end of December. So that one's going to be really fun. So you should keep an eye out.
That's great. We're all looking forward to that. Thank you so much. Oh, yes, go ahead.
I think the most interesting part to me was you talking about your research and how your dad and your family's history of fishing in that area really allowed you to have deep roots in researching with fishermen. And I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit more, because Boston is such a hub for research, especially in health and things like that. When you're doing research alongside folks, right? Like, what are the ways that you're bridging gaps in community, building community, and also like speaking people's language? I think that's really, really important, and I don't often see that in sort of the hard sciences. So I'd love for you to speak a little bit more about that.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that. So when you're doing research alongside people, how do you engage them, and how do you speak their language when you're doing your work? in the sciences?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And for this project with the community in Myrtle Beach, that's my community. So it was really easy because I already have this connection. And so what I'm doing with that project with my dad is writing about our methods and how we engaged with folks, because traditionally the way that people have done surveys with fishermen is they go to peers and they ask the fishermen like while they're fishing. And I'm like, y'all obviously ain't fishermen. Like, we over here trying to get something done and you want to ask us some questions? Like, get out of here. That is not the best time to ask someone a question when they're trying to work. So like for me, it was calling people up and going to their house and sitting down and having a glass of lemonade, some ham hocks, and just chatting. So that is a different, like, meeting people where they are is huge. If you come into somebody's home, you understand who they are. Like, you get more than just asking questions and getting answers. You see everything, and they feel comfortable in their space. And you should ask people questions when they feel comfortable, and building that trust is really important. And it's not something that just happens overnight. I think sometimes scientists are like, well, these people don't want to talk to me. And I'm like, yeah, because you just showed up randomly and they don't know you. Like, especially if you're a white scientist walking into a black neighborhood trying to ask questions, like, history goes to show, like, white people walking into black neighborhoods, that's people gonna be sketched out. So you have to, like, introduce yourself, you have to be part of the community for a while, and then you can start asking questions. But don't just walk up to somebody and start asking them questions. You, like, talk to them as people first, because you're a person, they're a person, have a conversation. Oh, how is your daughter? What is she up to? Oh, that's great. She got an A on her spelling test. That's awesome. And that takes a long, like, these interviews that we did took like 2 hours. 45 minutes of them were actually interviewing, and the other part of it was just like getting them comfortable and us chatting. So that's a big thing. And then the speaking their language thing. It's really funny that you said that, because so we had a social scientist working with us on this project, and she went through the transcripts, and I said, all right, so just so you know, it's maybe going to be a little hard for you to understand, because I don't know if y'all have ever been to the low country of South Carolina, but we got a little twang. Little Geechee Gullah twang happening there. And she started going through the transcripts, and she had like whole sections that she would highlight. She'd be like, I don't know what they're saying. And I'll be like, got you, Julia, I'll translate it for you. So you have to understand the cultural context that you're walking into. And if you don't have someone on your team that understands the dialect that the people are speaking, you lose so much information. Because if she were just to like, oh, I don't know what they're saying, we're going to throw that out. That was really important information, what he said. And just because he said it in a vernacular you didn't understand, you didn't put it in your data set. So that's a big thing. I went on a tangent, but there we go.
Awesome, thank you. We have a question from the virtual audience. Do you know of any shark species that have been taken off the red list, and what actions were taken to remove them from the list? I assume it's the IUCN red list.
So for clarification, the red list is, it moves from least concern to extinct. So nothing ever comes off the red list. It just changes its designation. And there are sharks that have changed their designation in the positive direction. I don't know the exact species, but it's been a handful. Most of them have been changing in the negative direction, though, which is not great. So they're moving closer to extinction and further from least concern. But we update, I say we because I'm on the shark specialist group, so I am one of the people who does these little designations. So if you have specific questions about how it works, I can explain it. But we do these reassessments every 10 years. And so it'll change unless there's an emergency need to reassess, like something major has happened. Every 10 years we update, so it may move closer to least concern or closer to extinction, depending on what threats have happened and what our counts and what our data says. So they do move more often than not in the negative direction, which is not good, but we do have some success stories out there.
Wonderful, thank you. Another question from the audience. Okay, go ahead.
First, I want to articulate your answers to all of these questions, and I feel like it's really beautifully done. And my question is, I photograph, and I've always had a passion for nature, the ocean, because I grew up, I was born in India, and where I grew up was 10 minutes from a beach. I always grew up near nature. And as I got older, I really started to appreciate more like nature photography, and I wanted to, one, notice that in your videos you had photographers that were on the boats, like taking pictures, and I thought that was really interesting that like people were on the boats photographing y'all as you were tagging sharks and doing all the research. What's the process to like get on a boat and photograph while your sharks, and how do you feel like photography and media and like arts really move your mission forward in shark conservation and ocean conservation in general?
Okay, great. Thank you for that question. So there was an interest in seeing that there were all the photographers on the boat, and wondering what the process is maybe to become a photographer on the boat, as well as the importance of media and sharing your work and these stories.
Well, first off, I appreciate that you just shot your shot right there. So come talk to me. You want to come out on the boat and take photos? I'll get you on a boat to take photos. The importance of media is huge. So one, seeing sharks in a non-threatening way is really important for people to not be afraid of them. So when you see a shark as an animal, just like a squirrel or anything else, you are like, oh, okay, this isn't this big, bad, like Jaws-esque man-eating killing machine that apparently has a vendetta against humans. It's just an animal, just like anything else, just like I am. It just like wants to live its life. And so that's really important to that, changing that narrative. And then it's also really important for the narrative of people of color being involved in science, that we have photographs of people that look like me doing this work. And so that's why we do a lot of photos and videos. And that's why I originally approached Fig Tree Films about making this, because I wanted people to be able to see themselves represented. And so that's why media is such a big part of what we do, because we want people to not be afraid of sharks, and we want people to see people of color doing these things, because previously, before MISS was started, if you Googled shark scientists, there was one person of color on the entire Google Images first page. And now when you Google it, it's actually majority people of color. So that's how images change. And so if there's a child and they're Googling shark scientists, I want them to see all different shades of people, all different genders, all different people from all over the world, because then they say, I can do that. Versus if you see someone, they all look the same and none of them look like you go, well, that's not for me. So that's why images, media, it all matters, because that's what we're consuming every day. That's what we see on social media. That's what we see on Google. That's what we see on TV. And those things get embedded in our minds. And it can be crippling, and it can stop people from pursuing things that they would be really good at. So media is super important.
And I just want to add that even behind the camera, the purpose of this show is really, it's actually part of a National Science Foundation grant to target new audiences, or not new audiences, but rather underrepresented audiences in YouTube STEM content. And so we have a mandate really to also make sure that it's not just diversity in front of the camera, but behind the camera. Our team is all women-led. Most of the people have been either a person of color or a woman or both. And so really it's totally shifted, I think, the environment of shooting. And prior to working on this show, our executive producer, Gabriela Figueredo, has done a decade's worth of shark shows. And it's been her first time on all-female crews, or being, not the only person of color. So it's been a great experience for both being in front and behind the camera.
Wonderful, thank you both. So we have a final question here from the virtual audience before we wrap up. The MISS program seems so great, which I think we can all agree. So what's next for you, Jasmin? Is there something you are striving to accomplish next aside from all your wonderful contributions and accomplishments to date?
What's next? I don't know. I guess. Okay, Sonia told me to do a book plug, so I guess I'm gonna do a book plug. I have a book coming out July 16th. Called Sharks Don't Sink, Adventures from a Rogue Shark Scientist. So yeah, look out for that. So that's happening. I don't really have anything, I mean, yeah, I'm just trying to do things. Like my goal is 1, to be happy, and 2, to leave the world better than I found it. So I'm just gonna keep striving towards those goals.
That's a great place to end. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sonia. Thank you, Jasmin. We are so grateful for you both joining us tonight and sharing your passion for marine science and your work to diversify the field of shark sciences. And again, a thank you to you, Sonia, and PBS for screening this terrific episode of your series, Sharks Unknown, with Jasmin Graham. We're looking forward to future episodes and to your book coming out in July. Tonight's event was made possible with generous support from the Lowell Institute, which allows the aquarium to offer these lectures free of charge. We look forward to continuing our lecture series in January, where we will screen journalist and filmmaker David Abel's new film, Inundation District, which examines how rising sea levels and climate change are impacting coastal communities like Boston. If you're with us in person this evening, our cash bar will be open for another half hour in the lobby. And to those of you who joined us virtually this evening, we are so glad you did. And again, thank you, Jasmin, thank you, Sonia, and thank you all for coming, and good night.
Can I just also shout out thank you to the aquarium for being a supporter of this program. We really couldn't make it without your help, so we really, really appreciate the support.
Well, it's an honor for us. We're grateful for the opportunity, so thank you.